All right, good morning, everyone. Distributed command execution using containers and Cog. I work at Honestbee. I'm part of the DevOps team there. So me and another person, which is Charles, we both run Kubernetes in production and in our staging environments. And while doing that, we try to contribute and we use as much as possible of the community tools. So like we have a Kubernetes plugin, we have some Fluentd Kubernetes images that we pushed, which support multiple logging targets if you're interested in how to log on your Kubernetes cluster. And we also try to push Helm charts and try to work around Helm charts as well. So we really do love the community. I think as has been mentioned by previous speakers as well, there's a lot of interesting projects. Many have been talked about here, Kubernetes, Helm. We also use Drone, a CI system, which is fully open source. And as mentioned earlier, we are trying to be as active as possible in community meetups in both Saigon, where I used to live 10 years, and Singapore, where I live now for a year. Okay, so what I want to talk about now is a tool called Operable Cog. Is anybody familiar with this tool? Anybody heard of it before? Yeah. One person, great. Anybody familiar with, well, first off, it's an open source tool. It's written in Golang and Erlang, so the API server is in Erlang and the relay server is in Golang, and we'll see more what that is later. Basically, it's a bot. It's for ChatOps. It has some concepts such as command bundles. It, from the ground up, has fine-grained access control mechanism, which is lacking in a lot of other bots, such as Hubot or the other options. And it builds on the concept of a composable pipeline. So with that, it's possible to create a distributed command execution. So we'll get to that. So what is Cog trying to solve? Who is familiar with ChatOps? All right, good amount of people. So I'm still gonna go through it. So a lot of the, like whenever there's an issue, there's a point where you need to try to figure out what's going on. So there's a bunch of questions that everybody is asking, and we need to find a way to collaborate on the incident. Another situation is in terms of onboarding. Whenever we are trying to manage DNS records, it's good to have a clear trace of who is doing what. A quote from operations engineering manager at Kickstarter, that basically a lot of engineers were just executing commands on their laptops. Nobody was knowing really clear on who was doing what, and there was no transparency or context. So the objective is to have more transparency and more auditability with ChatOps. So another example, I'm not sure if this is readable in the back of this room, but in this case we have a pager alert with VictorOps in this case, opening an incident based on some application performance metrics. And in this case, I'm manually copy-pasting information about the total number of instances registered with the load balancer. My colleague highlights that the database is like high on CPU, and so I put in the picture about it, and also after a while, it can recover, and we get notifications about that. So is this about ChatOps? Let's go further. All right, so one of the first concepts of Cog is, one of the first concepts is the way it organizes its commands, because without commands, a bot can't really do much. So Cog does this by organizing them in something called bundles. And bundles are available on a central warehouse called the warehouse, or bundles.operable.io. So in a bundle, you can have an EC2 bundle, which is to manage EC2 instances and related services. An S3 bundle to interact with S3, for example. I'm highlighting a lot of AWS because that's what we're using. If you're using Statuspage, you can have a bundle that have a bunch of actions to interact with Statuspage. And three bundles that we are pushed for Cog is, one is Route 53 to handle Route 53 zones and records, and a kubectl bundle that I just pushed just like last 2 days. And then auto-scaling, which is one that my colleague wrote to manage the auto-scaling group. So as I mentioned, bundles are available on a central warehouse. So people can just find there's the cloud native, the CloudFormation bundle from that Kickstarter is using. So that's a very expensive, very powerful bundle that unfortunately we're not using because we use Terraform. There's some console bundle that allow you to read keys in Slack, to write keys, with additional ability to hide information. For example, if you don't want to allow people to read keys in a public channel, but only in direct messages, it's possible. And there's a Datadog bundle, which is kind of pre-alpha, which allows you to chart out metrics of Datadog and basically just write a query and it will put a chart inside the Slack channel. So the second part about Cog that I want to highlight is the fact that there are composable pipelines. So this means Cog is built with the bringing the terminal environment or the browser environment where engineers are working to a collaboration channel such as Slack or HipChat. And by doing that, they try to emulate the features such as pipelines. So in this case, I don't know if this is visible on the screen, but I am executing the EC2 instance search command, and I'm passing in a query that selects on the tag, in my case an Elastic Beanstalk environment, and I pass that on through a pipeline into a JQ command, which is part of a JQ bundle, and I filter down to the public IP address, filter out any null values, and then do a little formatting to make it look a little bit nicer, resulting in a clickable link that people can just click to access. Of course, this is a very long command, and it's a bit terrible to write every time. The thing is, Cog allows you to create aliases as well. So you can create an alias for a personal user or a global alias that can share with other people. So then it allows users to combine tools to solve more complex problems. So now comes the distributed command execution. So the first thing is, when we want to work with a bundle, we basically use the Slack interface to tell Cog to download a bundle configuration. So we tell it to install, in this case, an EC2 bundle. Then we enable the EC2 bundle. And finally, we assign it to a relay group. So a relay group is a way of grouping relay servers. And relay servers are basically the command execution part of the infrastructure. So commands can be either native, so they can exist on the relay server, and then the API will tell the relay server to execute the command, or they can be container packaged, so they can be a Docker image. So the relay server just needs to have access to the Docker daemon, and will pull the Docker image, execute the command, take whatever standard in, if the command takes it, passes in the arguments for the command, and then pushes out back out of standard out of the JSON blob to return to the chat, and then it can go into the next pipeline command. So the results, usually JSON or text, are aggregated and combined using the pipeline methodology. So it's a very powerful concept. And it allows you to create, for example, you can also create triggers. So if you create a trigger which exposes a URL that can be called by a webhook, through a webhook, then you can also like initiate, for example, if you subscribe to a notification queue, if a certain JSON post is happening against the webhook, then it will execute that whole command pipeline. So you can create like a whole command pipeline in, it's kind of like Lambda basically. So this is the infrastructure. In the infrastructure, there is the chat system, which can be either Slack or HipChat. There's two adapters for Cog that integrate with Slack or HipChat. And then there's also IRC, but I don't think that is still maintained. And then there's the API server, which is written in Erlang. In Elixir, I think. And then there is a Postgres for the storage, and you have command line tool called Cog control, and a message bus to distribute the commands to the relay servers. So this is the infrastructure. Okay, I will go more about that later. So here is an example. In this case, the screenshot is supposed to show you that, can anybody read the screenshots? No. Okay. In this case, I am executing the help command to find more information about the Route 53 bundle, and it gives me an overview of the commands available within the bundle. And then it also shows me configuration variables, which need to be created by an administrator when you install the bundle. So there's the part where an administrator installs the bundle using the Slack, but also needs to create the dynamic configuration if there is additional configuration credentials required for the bundle to run. For example, for Route 53, we need to have Amazon credentials to access the Route 53 APIs. And then on the right side, there is showing that you can list zones, and then you can also create records if you specify the zone that you want to create a record in and the type. So this bundle is very early stage that I just wrote because in our case, our marketing people are using an outsourced service, and we need to often create a CNAME for the outsourced service. So instead of always having to go through the Amazon interface, whenever they ping me on Slack, I can just directly create the CNAME without having to go anywhere else, and they can also see that it was created. I think there is an example here where I'm actually executing a listing of all the zones, and then I create a record in a certain zone, in this case for push-prod subdomain, and I can use the dig command to find out if the zone is working correctly, if the record has been created correctly. Okay, so another example with EC2 that's the same as earlier. In this case, I've created an alias. So on the right screen, there is me using the full command for instance search plus JQ to parse out the values. And then I created an alias, eb-dev-ip, and it allows people to just simply type eb-prod-ip and get the IPs for the service. All right, so another example, a colleague of mine wrote an auto-scaling bundle. In this case, he just got a notification from the marketing department that there was going to be a push going out to our customers, so he just quickly uses the auto-scaling group scale command to just increase his instances and notifies the people that they have been scaled. Another example from Kickstarter, they use the CloudFormation bundle to create stacks and get feedback of how the stack was created. Apart from that, GitLab as well took an interest into Cog, and actually in their roadmap highlighted that they were going to integrate in their conversation-driven development plan to integrate with an operator or a chatbot provider such as Cog. So that was very promising. However, because the Slack integration with Slackbot and apps is a little bit more intuitive, so right now I believe they're focused on Slack apps, although they are not as easy manageable, and they're also looking at Mattermost. So they do, like, if you look at those repositories, they still get updates. They're not that old, but it's like a little bit less active now. So this was the GitLab roadmap about the conversation development idea, where everything is managed, the whole project is managed through the Slack interface. There is a very interesting like YouTube video on their page about this. It's very interesting. All right, so a little bit more highlights of what Cog also has. So there's the ability to do layered configuration. That means I can configure in this channel, this user has ability to access, or when this user executes the command, it will use this configuration. So you can have a base configuration, then you can have a channel level configuration that get merged on top of the base configuration, and then you can have a user level configuration that get merged on top of that. So it can be per user specific configuration for each command. The triggers are, as I mentioned, give you the ability to create webhooks, and the rendering is completely decoupled from chat provider. So if you are using Slack, you are using a templating language which is agnostic and renders into the Slack compatible output. All right, so I think I do have time because I went a bit fast. So I created a Slack channel here. I have two different channels. One is production. Is this readable? Yeah, okay. So I have one production cluster channel and one staging cluster channel and general channel. Okay. So the first thing I can do, I can use the kubectl bundle to execute a run command. Oh, let me just get the help out first. So, yes. So this allows you to interact with Kubernetes, and it gives you a listing all the commands that I ported in here, and the configuration that's required. So once you do a bundle install kubectl, then it will, you will have to set up a Kubernetes token, Kubernetes root certificate, and Kubernetes server endpoint. So when you do kubectl, I'm going to run the, an Nginx container. .10 because I'm going to do a rolling update. Alpine, and I'm going to expose port 80. So this is very similar to how you use kubectl in the command line. Hopefully it works. Yeah, so the deployment has been created, although the color looks red because currently the desired number of pods is 1, and there's 0 pods, so it's red. But if I go and ask the status of the deployment with the get command, deploy Nginx. So I'm getting the information about the deployment, which is Nginx. If you're familiar with Kubernetes, this is. So this is telling me that now the desired is 1 and the current running pods are 1, and they're all up to date. I'm working on making the timestamp more similar to the Kubernetes outputs, actually showing the age instead of just the timestamp. Then kubectl, I can expose this deployment. With a type of load balancer. If you see me make a mistake, please tell me. All right, so in this case, the service was created and it's of type load balancer, so the external IP is pending because AWS is provisioning the ELB. So kubectl get, I can get both deploy and SVC of the Nginx deployment. I could also kubectl get based on labels. So when you do the kubectl run command, it puts on a label called run with the key run, and the value is equal to the name of the application on the deployment. So this gives me, I didn't specify the resource type. All the pods, for example, that have the label Nginx, in this case 1. So I can kubectl scale. Well, this is basically now a Kubernetes demo, so I don't know if I should continue, but I can, just 1 second. Scale, deploy Nginx, replicas 3. And I should get 3 pods. All right. Okay, SVC. What is the load balancer status? Okay. Maybe it works. Could be that Amazon is still provisioning it. Oh, there it is. So let me see. Under here. So this is not just scripted. All right, so we have the, I think this is too small. This is too big. Here we have the instances. They are in service now, and normally these will start serving soon. Okay, it takes a while. While it's preparing, I could create a Route 53 record if I find my Slack interface. Okay. All right. I don't remember this. Okay, so first I need to get the zone because I forgot the zone. So the blue one is a public zone, the yellow one is a private zone, and then just it's it's a record. Type CNAME, zone here, nginx.spanhub.com, and then the name of the load balancer. And now, if I go to this, if the load balancer works, okay, what's wrong? Let's do a dig. Was it short? Let's look at the help first. So it's very similar to working in the command line, basically. And it allows people to see what you're doing and to collaborate on any issues. So I'm going to do a short dig on the Nginx. .com. Okay, so it returns. So let's try that again. Yeah, it's responding. It's my browser is caching the wrong IP, I think. All right, so I think this is where I'm going to leave the demo part. I could also do a rolling update, set the image, and more things like that. Let's see what else is in this. Oh yeah, there's an important part. All right. Okay, so the thing is, Operable took 1 year to build this, and they have now closed down. They stopped the operations. So the COG bot is completely open source. It's open for contributions, but right now it's not being so active anymore. So part of my talk is hoping that people here may be interested in this framework and maybe want to contribute or want to help work on this. And another thing is I believe that the Relay framework server part, with all of the serverless frameworks such as Kubeless, Fission.io, and Function, I think it would be great if COG would actually kind of just keep the API part, talking to Slack, and just targeting the other function as a service frameworks. So if people are interested, that would be awesome. And that's my talk.
Thank you, Vincent.